Okay, so starting off today's show, we have many different topics we want to get into today, but before I start, I'm going to introduce my guest. He has been on the show many times before, but I believe the last time he was on was right around the start of football season when we were doing our predictions, and it is my honor to welcome my guest today, Andrew Wiesner. Andrew, how are we doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing good, man. I'm good at talk football. I'm glad to be back on the show, bro. I missed being on the show with you, and we have a lot of football to talk to, my man.
Yeah, let's do it. So the first story I want to get into with you is the Philadelphia Eagles and their decision to announce Jalen Hurts, the rookie quarterback out of the University of Oklahoma, to be their starting quarterback for this week's upcoming game against the New Orleans Saints. And Andrew, it's funny because you know how going into the season I felt about Carson Wentz. I felt that this guy deserved the money he was getting paid. I believe last year he was really able to elevate the people around him in that Philadelphia Eagles offense, lead them to a division title, and unfortunately during this season when the NFC East is still very up for grabs, he hasn't been able to take those Bulls by the horn, and I just think this whole situation is very unique. It's very rare that we spend this much time on this show talking about a football team that is 3-8, but I think it's warranted because when you look at this Philadelphia Eagles team, they're paying their quarterback a boatload of money. And when you look at Carson Wentz's contract, that makes me want to think that he's going to be the Eagles quarterback next year because I'm not necessarily sure if there's any other team in the league that would take that contract. And the bottom line is he's not very good right now. So I'm not necessarily sure if the Philadelphia Eagles had a choice to start Jalen Hurts because they were very slowly approaching unwatchable territory. But how do you feel about the way Doug Peterson has handled this whole thing so far?
Yeah, man. Well, I think it's a move. And listening to Doug Peterson's press conference, he said that we just need a shot of energy, and it's not just Carson Wentz; it's a whole team. And I agree. I think they just need a shot of new life. I think the playoffs right now are out of the picture, but I know you talked about his major contract he just signed, so I don't see him going anywhere for the time being. I think he should get a change in scenery, but yeah, I'm just looking at Wentz, man. He's just making a lot of mental mistakes. Looking on his film, his strides and his legs and his feet are not being set correctly. He's just making bad reads, and I think it's a lot of mental reps that he's just not getting in, and just mechanical errors. And I think they should keep him and just try to fix him in the off season next year when you have a full schedule, like full training camp and everything. But I don't know, man. I was always questionable about why drafting a quarterback in the second round with Jalen Hurts when you just signed a major guy.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point because here's the thing. The more and more I think about it, I, at the beginning of the segment, started off by saying this is a very unique situation. And I think another part of what makes this situation so unique was the fact that Carson Wentz in 2017, which keep in mind, it wasn't that long ago, there was a time in a pre-Patrick Mahomes world that I believe if you were to ask any football fan, if you were to build your team around one player, who would it be and why? I think Carson Wentz, when he was out there in 2017 slinging the ball and on track to win an MVP, he was super young. It was only his second year in the league, and he was looking like a guy that could have a big, big future. Now, unfortunately, he tore his ACL in that heartbreaking game against the Rams, and we know what happened. Nick Foles goes on to lead the Eagles to a Super Bowl title, and Eagle fans wanted a statue built of Nick Foles outside the stadium. But ultimately, Doug Peterson decided, okay, you know what? As great as Nick Foles was, it was time to move on, and we're going to be building around Carson Wentz. And at the time, I didn't think that it was the wrong decision. But the thing is, when you combine that with drafting Jalen Hurts and the abundance of injuries that the Eagles have had, especially to their offensive line. Lane Johnson now out for the year. Brandon Brooks got hurt in the preseason. He's been out since. The Eagles' offensive line is not very good right now. And I do think when you look at Carson Wentz, I think a change of scenery would be good because I just think when you combine all of those different things, we shouldn't be shocked that this is happening, Because think about it. If you were a starting quarterback, you want your job to be secured. And to be honest, when you look at how much money Carson Wentz was making going into this season, and when you look at the fact that the Eagles drafted Jalen Hurts in the second round, I totally understand that you could say, oh, there are no excuses. I just got to do my job better. But what other quarterback room in the NFL has that kind of situation on their hands,
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you, bro. But the thing I got to look at is, something about Carson Wentz is maybe he's just not the guy we thought he was. And I know that's a big statement, but if you look back on that 2017, he had two Hall of Famers on the offensive line. Now you get Jason Peters, a washed-up Jason Peters, and Lane Johnson, like you said, just injury-riddled, and their interiors just having an issues. He's not having much of a supporting cast, and to me, I think that maybe he fed off all that talent on the team on the offensive side, and now that you look at him, I don't think maybe he's like that guy that could really just take you out. He could just, bring anyone in and he could just light it up. So I think maybe we might be overthinking about how really good he is because he had so much talent in that 2017. What do you think about that?
Well, it's funny because I do think that is a pretty valid argument, and I do think that you can make the argument that, I don't think this guy's been the same player since coming off the torn ACL, and that's not surprising, I think Carson Wentz has peaked already in the NFL, but I will say this. You say, he had all that talent, and in 2017, that's why he was so good. And, no doubt, that was a very talented team. They were able to win a Super Bowl. But last year, towards the back end of the season, let's not forget, the Eagles lost a game to the Miami Dolphins, and that was when we didn't know the Miami Dolphins were, anything that they are right now. They were still the Miami Dolphins that were tanking. They lost a game to Miami, and we had people out here saying, the Eagles are 4-7, they have no shot, and their whole team was hurt, and Carson Wentz last year was really able to elevate his team and lead the Eagles into the playoffs. Now, I think when you look at this year's squad, it starts off with the general manager, and I don't know, Andrew, if you're familiar with the Philadelphia Eagles and what their draft history has been over the last couple of years, but this is a team that took some guy named J.J. Arcega-Whiteside a couple picks before DK Metcalf went. This is an Eagle team that took Jalen Reagor, and I totally understand. He had a nice punt return touchdown the other day against the Packers, but they took that kid over Justin Jefferson, the wide receiver in Minnesota that's currently killing it right now. When you combine those two things, and the decision to draft Jalen Hurts. And I'm not saying Jalen Hurts is a bad player, and I think he deserves the chance to start on Sunday. I just think when you combine all of those factors, we shouldn't be shocked that this is happening to Philadelphia, because we can make the argument all we want. Doug Peterson, he's a Super Bowl winning coach. He's done so much for the city. But the bottom line is, if I'm Howie Roseman, and if I'm Jeff Lurie, the owner of the Eagles, and I see that I'm paying my quarterback a boatload of money, and my team is borderline unwatchable right now, and we can't even win a trash NFC East, I'm not happy.
I know. I think Harry Roseman really screwed up this year with, just adding a young kid at quarterback. It just creates this locker room division, where, now you're seeing it. Jason Kelsey and Fletcher Cox, they talked about their opinions to reporters, saying how they side with Wentz and they think he's the man. And it's just creating this division for no reason. You don't need to draft a second guy. You could have drafted Denzel Mims, I bet.
Yeah.
They could have drafted a bunch of new talent for this kid, or even a tackle or something. And my thing is, man, it's just I don't like Harry Roseman. I don't like how he's bringing this team. What direction? There doesn't seem.
They don't have an identity, yeah.
And now they're really screwed in the salary cap because they're paying this quarterback a boatload of money. They're not going to be able to see. The thing is they had a perfect time, and 2017 they capitalized when they were paying Carson not as much money. But now you sign him to the max deal. You can't pay other positions the money you need in free agency. And if you can't draft and you're going to spend second-round picks on quarterbacks that are going to be starting or on the bench, then what do you expect? And I agree with you, Zach. I totally don't like this direction this team's going in.
Now, let me ask you this. Doug Peterson is in a very interesting situation because, as you said, this is a coach that he's done a lot for the city, man. Eagle fans before that Super Bowl they've never won a Super Bowl, and he delivered that city their first Super Bowl championship, and that was a great team. And Andrew, sometimes I could be hard on head coaches when I'm evaluating them. I don't think there are a lot of perfect head coaches in the NFL. And I'm not going to lie, I do think that his first 4 years in Philadelphia, Doug Peterson was a top 10 coach in the league. I'm confident in that. But I'll admit, this year has been awful. And the development and the trajectory of development with their players has been awful. Jim Schwartz, their defensive coordinator, has been awful. It's not like their defense doesn't have talent. I thought bringing in Darius Slay would be a move that would push them over the top. They drafted some kids in the secondary as well. Their defensive line has Fletcher Cox and all that talent like you mentioned. So I think the talent isn't the issue. the player development is and the coaching is, and when you combine all those different factors plus how bad the GM has been recently, if you're Jeff Lurie, the owner of this team, what do you do? Because I can make the argument that, okay, maybe this is on Doug Peterson, and I think part of it is, I don't think this is all on Carson Wentz. I think what a lot of Eagle fans are not understanding is that if Jalen Hurts goes out there and plays well on Sunday against the Saints, and God forbid they win, the Eagles then have an even bigger problem, because now you're paying a quarterback to just sit on the bench, and you don't even know if Jalen Hurts is going to be the answer or not. And I think Jalen Hurts, if he's ever going to succeed in the NFL, it'll be like in a Taysom Hill role, and that's not worth the second-round pick. But anyways, if you're the owner of the Eagles, how are you looking at the situation going into next year? Are you under the belief that if you could get Carson Wentz proper coaching and maybe some better weapons around him, you could still succeed? Because I agree when you say, oh, Kelsey and some of the other guys in that locker room still have his back and support him.
Yeah, so what I would do is, because I think his contract's almost untradeable, and if you're going to trade him, I think you're going to have to give up some draft
But the only thing is before you finish is, like, if you're a team like the Indianapolis Colts, let's say, right? And I do think that Frank Reich, he was their coach, their current coach, and he used to be in Philly in 2017 when Wentz was having his best season, and he's known to be very good with quarterbacks. And I do think, as you said earlier, Carson Wentz really needs a change of scenery. And Andrew, when you're paying a quarterback and you get good quarterback play, I think Carson Wentz is worth that contract when he's playing well. The Colts also have one of the best offensive lines in football that they could do a good job protecting him with. So maybe that could be a mix that works.
Yeah. It's just my question to you, Zach, is, let's say you're the Indianapolis Colts GM. How much would you? What trade would you do to get Carson Wentz with that contract? Would you ask for draft capital or no?
No, I would say maybe a second-round pick.
Okay. Oh, so you believe in him that much?
Dude, I just think that he's had one really bad year, and there's no doubt. I'm not disagreeing with Doug Peterson's decision to bench him this week. He's been awful, and I'm a Carson Wentz supporter. Everyone who listens to this show knows that, but he's not playing well this season. There's no doubt about it, and he doesn't deserve to be the Eagles' starting quarterback anymore for the rest of this season at least. I just think it may be the best move for both parties to just move on, and when you look at what has happened with the Eagles situation, I do think that I'm not going to say it's excused, but like you kind of see why. Their coaching has been awful. It looks like they're never ready to play. Their whole team is hurt. They don't really have any weapons. And Frank Reich was the Eagles' offensive coordinator when they won that Super Bowl, and that's when Carson Wentz was playing his best football. Plus, Phil Rivers shouldn't be there anymore. So I think it's a good fit.
Yeah, I like that idea. If they can make that trade, I'd see a good fit for him. I mean, you got weapons and a great offensive line. I think he could flourish in there. It's just amount of how the deal would be taking place and if the Eagles are going to move on. But, yeah, I like that. I could see a lot of spots with him. Definitely Indianapolis, definitely.
Mm-hmm. All right, so that will be it for this segment, and we'll be moving on in a short bit.